Hello, and welcome back to Living a Culture of Life podcast by Human Life International. I'm your host, Colleen, and I'm so excited to share today's episode with you. On this episode, I have a conversation with Dr. Joe Malone, who's a sexual integrity scientist. If you've been following this show for a while, you may remember Dr. Joe from his previous episodes. He originally came on the show to discuss the biology of how men and women bond differently, and he's been back on a number of times to discuss topics like how contraception disrupts this bonding process and the negative health impacts of hookup culture. Well, Dr. Joe reached out to me recently and said that he had some new research he wanted to share, and I was delighted to have him back on. His episodes are always jam-packed full of interesting information about how science backs up God's plan for sexuality. So on today's episode, Dr. Joe and I discuss how boys and girls are affected differently by oxytocin during puberty and how this really primes girls to desire a chaste relationship. We also discuss how promiscuity has negative impacts on fertility, which is something I never realized. I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I know that I did. And as always, please remember to like and follow the show and leave us a 5-star review if you're listening on our audio platforms. And please welcome Dr. Joe Malone to Living a Culture of Life. Welcome back to the podcast, Dr. Joe.
Thank you so much, Colleen. It's an honor to be here always.
It's great to have you back. I always love having you on as a guest because you always just bring in such interesting scientific angles to being able to defend marriage to a secular audience. So I'm really thankful that you're here today to give us those tools.
Thank you very much. I believe God has called me to that, and it's an honor to be able to, exercise that mission, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. I'm also just such a nerd about it because it's so cool to see how the physical material world backs up the rules that God has given us from a spiritual perspective. So I love seeing the intertwining of the spiritual and the physical. And I feel like our conversations always talk about that. So
yes, they definitely do. Go ahead.
And I was going to say, you mentioned to me that you have new research about how girls' and boys' brains, when they're going through puberty, I think respond to oxytocin differently. So could you just talk about that new research for our audience and share that with them?
And it's new to me. It's not necessarily new to the world. There's so much research out there on so many different things. A lot of it never gets really examined, but so this is not brand new research, but it's again, relatively new. So what I discovered was that both sexes, male and female, both get a 5 times increase in their oxytocin from about, during puberty, from about age 10 to about age 16 these days. And with the boys, it just basically affects them in their sex drive. It raises their sex drive, which, they don't need a lot of help there anyway. So their sex drive is already pretty high with all the testosterone that they get, 20 times more in a lot of cases. With the girls, it affects their sex drive, but their sex drive is lower anyway because they have more progesterone and more prolactin naturally. And it strongly affects their bonding drive. Now, what do I mean by bonding drive? Well, oxytocin and vasopressin, the two main bonding chemicals, are intertwined, as you said earlier, in this whole sexual attraction, sexual sex drive, mating. In our case, we call it dating. And what's happening now with today's hookup culture, as opposed to the past, is that this bonding instinct in young women, girls and young women, is being thwarted. Now, their brains are also, the females' brains are also organized in utero to be sensitive to oxytocin, and the bonding effects of oxytocin. So they're set up. It appears to me the design is we're designed to, go through our childhood non-sexually, and then starting, with puberty, sexual thoughts start happening, and all of that. But it's supposed to be gentle and slow developing as far as these relationships between the boys and the girls. It's supposed to be romantic. I mean, that's what the girls are longing for is romance, a bond and romantic relationships. and they're not getting him. They're getting they want warm, respectful romance, kind of like a Hallmark movie. But instead of getting warm, respectful romance, they're getting cold, casual sex in many cases, and they're not being able to bond as they wish to. So again, to review, both males and females, oxytocin increases by 5 times during puberty, but when the boys, it only affects their sex drive and not their bond. It doesn't create a bonding desire in the boys, at least for the
Mhm.
most part. It does in the girls though, and they're being thwarted in that in our society, as opposed to the stretch of history before us. So that's probably one of the main reasons that we have such high levels of girls being depressed and anxious. 57% in the last study that I saw, compared to 29% for the boys. And unhappiness, since 1976. Well, 1976, high school graduating senior girls were happier on average than the boys were. Since then, it's gradually gone down. And you think about what started happening in the 60s and by the mid 70s, the sexual
Yeah.
revolution. Since then, their happiness levels have declined to where they're much lower than the boys. And like I said, they're twice as likely to, they're no 57%, yeah, twice as likely, ballpark figure, 57 versus 29%, to be unhappy, suicidal, cutting, all the things that you're doing when you're depressed and anxious.
Mhm.
So the other interesting thing on this is that the number, again, I'll say this too, at 10 years old, the girls have a higher level of happiness level on average. By 16, twice as many of them are more unhappy than the boys. And again, I don't have the statistics on it, but I bet in the past that was different when we had a romantic based, culture and a chastity based culture.
Mhm.
Um, but also what they found in this research was that the girls are, for the vast majority of them, the reason that they are depressed is that they had some kind of a breakup, some kind of a relational breakup. It was like 64%. Now, the boys that are depressed, only 16% of them said it was because of some kind of a relational breakup. So if you get the
Mhm.
picture that I'm painting, Colleen, in the old
Yeah.
days, um, pre-sexual revolution, we had a system that allowed, think Little House on the Prairie, think, the Waltons, think any of those shows that portray the old days. There was the norms in society were gradual, intimacy only after marriage. Of course, that was the goal, but certainly it wasn't like it is now, where the object is to not have any kind of emotional ties and have sex, but no emotional ties. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I
Well, and
actually
one
have a
other thing.
question.
Oh,
Oh,
can I add one other thing?
yeah.
I mean, this is kind of a kind of off the wall thing, but I think you'll like it, and our listeners will like it. Um, Speaking of romance movies, women in their your age and and up, 29% more women say that the rom-coms are their favorite movie type than the males do. As girls and women these days, especially, grow up, they continue to have that strong desire for that type of a lifestyle. If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Also, girls are just, like, so relationship oriented that it also fits into that. I had, one of my friends was telling me the story of a time that he was in a mixed group of guys and girls, and they were watching this action movie, and it started out with a lot of action, and the girls were just like, "Why are we watching this?" And then slowly they became, like, invested in the, like, characters, and then by the end of it, it was, like, more relationship oriented, and the boys were like, "Okay, we're over this," and the girls were like, "No, we wanna keep watching because there's these romantic relationships that we're, like, invested in, and we wanna see what happens." But I actually had a really dumb question going back to what you said at the beginning. It might be dumb. It might be something our audience is thinking. I always thought that oxytocin was, like, the cuddling hormone, the bonding, it was, like, really feel good. Why would that increase sex drive? Like, it seems like it's something that would increase the bonding between men and women instead of increasing sex drive. So why does that increase it for boys and not increase their bonding?
That's not a dumb question. It's actually a great question. Um, and Oxytocin is a really amazing hormone, biochemical. It does so many things and does them so well. They talk about it being nature's medicine because it has all these anti-inflammatory properties, anti-stress, anti-cortisol, anti just about everything that you can imagine that's bad. It's good against.
Mhm.
It helps. But it also, when you think about the functions of these different chemicals, like oxytocin and vasopressin. Vasopressin helps with water retention or not in the body. That's the main thing. Then when I work with medical professionals, there they say, "Oh, it's about water retention or not," but it's not. The other parts are again the bonding with the females, the kind of the territoriality and that type of thing, and actually high vasopressin males in those kind of relationships actually have better relationships. They show with their wives. Getting to your question though, the oxytocin, and again, so it does some important things besides the bonding part. With oxytocin, it not only does it have a huge secretion at childbirth and bond the mother to the baby, but also at orgasm. And also, in males, in orgasm, it's what allows the ejaculation to happen. So oxytocin is what allows the ejaculation to happen. So what it comes down to is that when male and female properly formed, I think we'd say, and in the proper relationship have sex, then they've shown, what the research has shown is that the males and females, again, in the marriage situation, maybe newly married, that is, they actually have higher quality sex than people who are having sex that, is, with different people, I guess you'd say promiscuous, sex. So there's something about it, oxytocin and vasopressin, that rewards the not only the bonding, but it literally ups the sexual high that people get from having sex, from having orgasm, and that type of thing. Oh, one more thing: oxytocin also lets down the milk when mothers are come to the time to nurse their baby. So think
Yeah.
about how important all those functions are, because without them, we wouldn't be here at all. So
So it
it
seems to
seems
me like,
counterintuitive. It seems counterintuitive, but I think it's kind of just the quality. It's when we get to that place where we have great oxytocin relationships with another person,
Mhm,
then there's all these different rewards, including better sex.
mhm. It seems like it's one of those things where the increased levels of oxytocin makes them want to have, like you said, the chaste relationship leading up to marriage, the bonding that needs to happen to be able to enter into marriage. And then the increasing of the sex drive for the men ensures that once a couple is married, they're actually having sex and like having children. So like from like an evolutionary standpoint, it's like making sure that the couple is bonded and then also making sure that they actually are having sex and reproducing.
Yes, exactly. It's a it's a wonderful design when you look at it, and again, it just kind of keeps getting deeper, as far as the bond and again the relaxation between the two and the couple of really being able to
Mhm,
be themselves and uh, share with the other one, what's pleasurable, what's less pleasurable, that type of thing. So um, yeah, and what we're looking at here goes along with everything else that the other parts I'm going to talk about today. It
mhm,
just the design favors two people falling in love, getting engaged, getting married, starting to have children, probably having them sooner rather than later because of the age situation, and just even the quality of the sex is much is higher than the ones with the people that are being sleeping around, so to speak. Although
mhm,
it seems like to people that it's better, more exciting to have sex with different people, it actually turns
mhm.
out that physiologically we're designed for it to be better if we just have sex with one person.
Yeah. No, so I love seeing how God designed us and how it plays out that way.
But
How does Oh, go ahead.
the important point to remember here is that I think when we took away from women the power of chastity, basically, that no sex occurs until until there's a commitment of a marriage and that type of thing. It really has messed the whole system up because they're designed that way, and the males are designed, as you said earlier, to have high sex drives, and if many of them, if sex is available, then they try to obtain it. So I guess it's like the women are supposed to be the deciders, and decision makers, and we've kind of taken that role away from them and encouraged them to be promiscuous, and it's messed everything up. I just kind
And
of wanted to finish off with that. Go ahead.
and we've also talked before how being, like, promiscuous is going to affect your ability to bond with other people. So, for girls who are hooking up frequently and then decide that they want to invest in, like, a long-term relationship, they're gonna struggle to bond with that man. Is that am I remembering this correctly?
Can you can you say that one more time?
I guess
Just
I'm just thinking of there's, like, so many girls in our today's culture who are involved in hookup cultures. They've hooked up
yeah.
with multiple people. When they decide that they, like, want to settle down with someone, is it going to be harder to bond with that person because of a history of promiscuity?
Yes, it will be, but I think what is required is a reset. A period of time where they're not hooking up, and where the male that they have chosen, they chose each other,
Mhm.
also is not hooking up. So, I, we are designed after a period of time to, I think, our brain chemicals to reset. So, it takes a period of time, and that's what I advise young people is if you've been sexually active and you want to go down the pathway we're talking about, and I think the better pathway, then you need to um, become chaste for a period of time and look for somebody from the opposite sex that's chaste, and then start that allow that bonding process to take place. Because as you remember from our other conversations, males bond in a chaste relationship where they're attracted, but they're not having sex to, especially to orgasm, because it interferes with the chemical, the vasopressin process. So they need to imitate the old days, with the way that they didn't have sex, and they courted, so to speak,
Mhm.
and dated, they were around each other, but they saved the sex for the after the wedding. And
Yeah.
it's kind of in our nature too, delaying gratification. Everything, all the research has shown that as people learn how to delay gratification, or if they're good at it in the first place, they're
Mhm.
much more successful than the ones who aren't good at delaying gratification. Does that help?
Yeah. No, it does. I also had a question just about you have oxytocin spikes in both boys and girls when they're young. In today's world, there's, like, so much social media that young children are using, and that's, like, increasing dopamine. Does that affect these oxytocin spikes at all or affect their, like, how oxytocin affects their brain?
Yeah, generally, social media has been negative, on just about every aspect that you can look at, um, and it's again, it takes away from that process that we're talking about, where in the past it was just a limited number of people that were candidates, and you saw them in person, and you got to know them in person, and the relationship was an in-person relationship, and so when that happens, then it's so much better than a social media situation, because there's so many things that we all know, aren't really real on social media, and people polish their images. They don't tell the truth. It's set up for problems from the beginning, and it's set up to break bonds, because there's so many different ways that it can make you want to go down a pathway that isn't a bonding pathway.
Mhm. Yeah. I had one more question, which is not wasn't one of the topics that you brought up to me, but while we were talking about tweens and teens and puberty, it made me think of it. I had Claudia Perez Bustamante on the podcast recently, and she's a trauma therapist. And she was talking about how when young boys are exposed to pornography, they can become, like, automatically addicted. Would you like do you have any insight into, like, why from, like, a brain chemical perspective that might be?
Yeah, yeah. There's porn elicits a couple of really strong biochemicals delta phos B is one, and that makes you crave it. And then CREB, that's an acronym, CREB, is the other one that goes with it after it's done its work. It literally changes at the genetic level the brain to want to crave those images and more and more, more and more extreme images, the delta phos B. And then the CREB makes it where those images don't satisfy. So you got to have more and more of the more extreme, and such. So literally it changes boys' brains, especially because they're very vulnerable to it. And again, with the amount of testosterone that they have, it with a boy, it all works together because of his high 20 times on average more testosterone than the girls. 3 areas of his brain that are twice as big that have to do with sex drive than the girls. 3 areas of her brain, and there's just a mismatch there. The boys have the girls have sex hormone binding globulin like 13 times more, and that inactivates testosterone. So they're set up. By the way, they get gaming addiction too, where generally girls don't. So it's a chemical process that literally changes the brain at the genetic level, and it's just the only solution to that is kind of like what we're talking about with becoming abstinent with sex. Is you got to become abstinent from porn for a period of time, and then the brain will reset itself. So does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It just occurred to me, like, I just wanted to ask because I thought that you'd have an insight to the chemical side of it, which I was hoping would be enlightening to our audience. You also mentioned that you did research into how promiscuity affects fertility. So do you mind sharing with our audience what you were discovering there?
Yeah, it all fits together because
Mhm.
very interesting research. Again, this is research that isn't brand new, but what they found was that prostitutes, or we call them sex workers more recently, they have a much higher rates of anti-sperm antibodies. Now, what anti-sperm antibodies do, as you can imagine, is attack sperm. And what they determined was that these prostitutes, these sex workers, um, they basically ended up with 43% more antibodies than the controls did. Controls, actually, the controls had 5%. They had 43%, and that was the one. That was for the ones that used artificial protective mechanisms, prophylactics. The ones that didn't use any of those prophylactics had a 61.3% higher or antibodies in their systems. And it's explained by repeated inoculation, so to speak, from different males with sperm and the androgens in the sperm. And so the woman's body reacts to that and raises her antibody levels. So it's kind of like an immune response where, again, as I said earlier, we're designed for that one person, one and one, and a lifetime with that person. And when that happens, then the males, there's another process that I found fascinating that goes along with it. So is that clear that women that have sex with a lot of different guys, their bodies become really, really active as far as creating anti-sperm antibodies
Mhm.
because it's not in our nature for that to happen. The other thing is I'm looking through my notes here. When it's done where there's let's just say a marriage, let's say a chaste marriage leading up to it, the two of them have never been with anybody else. This is best case scenario, but it'll work also on a reset situation. When they're making love, they're in the marital embrace. His sperm has actually properties in it that lower her immune system, and so with
Mm.
time and time after time of them being together, his seminal fluid, to be more accurate, has this chemical that lowers her immune system, and then same thing with her system. Her system, as it gets used to this same guy and this
Mhm.
situation, it also lowers itself as well. So One of the great mysteries I've always had was why it takes, there's 250 million sperm in a typical ejaculate of a man. Why, when it only takes one sperm to fertilize the egg, why would you have that many extra sperm? It turns out that in the woman's system, that typically, there's her system, as I'm saying, attack the sperm, and most of them don't get through. So, but that happens less and less as the couple get more and more used to each other. And again, that's the reason that conception by prostitutes is really low. Promiscuous young women, like in Malaysia, where they studied this, was real low. And this is a long time ago when they were doing that study. And so it makes sense that if we're not designed for multiple, we're not designed for polygamy, I should say, then it's going to be probably not conducive to having children.
Do you know if that like lowering of the immune system continues on past like that brief period of time? Because I know that I've heard that the like second half of a woman's cycle leading up to her period, her immune system is slightly suppressed just in case she is pregnant, because otherwise the body might reject the embryo. So does I guess like the lowering of the immune system when the man and woman are having sex, does that also prep the body to be able to not fight off an embryo that could be conceived?
Yes, yeah, it's all, they call it a secret handshake between the male and the female's fluids, so to speak. They're chemicals, but it all is kind of around that idea that they are bonded to each other, and that I'm sure that helps with the oxytocin, the vasopressin, because it's all kind of signaling each other inside their bodies that it's okay for this person, it's okay for his semen to be in me, and it's okay for it to impregnate me. So when they're having multiple partners, then the signal is opposite. It's not okay, for that to happen. So, plus, I mean, when you're having multiple partners, there's all these other pathogens that come in with, the HPV and all that type of thing. So, I found that just fascinating, though, to realize that physically down to the the bonding process benefits couples down to fertility, even raising fertility with a committed marital bond.
Yeah. It's also nice that there's like a positive benefit to remaining chaste and like saving sex for marriage. And it's not just, oh, you're going to avoid X, Y, or Z diseases. Like you were saying, there are other pathogens, but also if you do that, you are going to be able to bond better and like have a like better sex life with the person that you marry. So it's not just like a avoid these diseases, but a like, here's the positive benefits of that as well.
Yes, it's all very positive, and that's what struck
Mhm.
me was
Yeah.
it's so positive when it's done this way, and the um, it's positive to both because it brings out a lot of great behavior patterns in the males. They
Mhm.
become more productive, less reckless, and all that type of thing. It brings out a lot of great elements in the female as well. So, um, maternal instincts, and just it's how we were designed to work, optimally. So
Yeah.
that's
Did
um,
Did you do any research into how promiscuity affects a male's fertility?
no, I didn't. I suppose that if he's being promiscuous and the women he's being promiscuous with are as well, then it's going to affect it that way because he's going to be, with promiscuous women who are going to have a lower fertility uh,
Mhm.
potential than it would be otherwise. So I don't have any specific research on it though.
Yeah. No, it's just something that occurred to me when I was preparing for the podcast because I wasn't sure if like a man being with multiple women is going to somehow negatively affect his sperm or if it's only on the part of the woman. So, yeah, I thought I'd ask.
I'm glad. I'm glad that
Yeah.
there's no dumb questions. But when you think about this, it also makes sense that marriage would be the number one predictor of life happiness, marriage quality, I should say. So And the biggest predictor of that is number of premarital sexual partners, with more being worse, So
Mhm.
again, it kind of all fits together like something that's been greatly designed and is meant to work really, really effectively. So,
Mhm.
any other questions you have?
I did have one which is, like, slightly off topic, but how or sort of does the brain how does the brain change in, like, a long-term relationship? Like, if you have a couple who gets married and, like, they stay married, how does that bonding look over the course of the marriage? Do you happen to know, like, the bonding side of that?
Yeah, the brains, I think, more and more work together with each other. Literally, the rest of the body, when they lay down to sleep at night, if they're happily married couple, their blood pressures both drop. Didn't happen in the unhappy partners, and didn't happen in the non-married partners that they did the experiment with. And also their hearts um, synchronize, their heartbeats synchronize. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. So there's all these physical things, all these physical benefits that um, come along with this, and the brains just get more and more where they're in tandem with each other, where they're able to kind of anticipate what the other one's going to say, and that type of thing, and what they're gonna do and how they're gonna feel. So um, yeah, so they have a tendency to mold together, and especially if they can absolutely trust each other, like we're talking about here, where they've and again, I know most people probably listening to this have had um, not the history of absolute chastity and that type of thing. I mean, nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect for sure. Don't have a perfect past. But the important thing to get out of this is that it's not never too late, and you can reset and actually get in a position where you have these benefits. So it takes about 4 months for a bond, an oxytocin, a vasopressin bond to form up. At least 4 months. At least 4 months. So you want to be able to um, have a chaste relationship
Mhm.
and enjoy it, and then I would recommend year and a half of a courtship, and then marriage. But it doesn't mean if you're not a virgin, so to speak, that this isn't for you. It's actually, it really is for you, because your body and mind have been being used in a way that is not the way they're designed, and so they'll work a lot better when you use them in the way that they're designed.
Yeah. If there was someone listening who was, like, engaged in hookup culture or casual sex, and they want to be able to live out this, like, ideal of, like, being able to bond ideally with somebody, do they need would they have to how would they go about that reset? Like, would it just be a stop hooking up and now you're ready to bond with a man if you, like, take time and you don't have sex until marriage? Or did they have to go, like, a period of time without dating anybody to kind of allow their, like, brain to detox from the chemicals before being ready to bond with someone?
Well, I think the absolute best case scenario is what they call a dating fast. And I know some young Catholic folks that do that, the dating fast.
Mhm.
For a year, they don't date anybody, and so I think that's the absolute best case scenario. It can be the other way that you described as well. So, um, but the bottom line comes down to no sexual no sexual intercourse, nothing that is outside the limits of what the church would say is right, during that time period. And just in general, if you're not a Christian, then just again, what they did in the past, as far as uh, yes, attraction, kissing, hugging, all that's really important, because there's bonding there in the physical touch. Oxytocin for one thing, but uh, the key thing is cutting off the sex, especially involving orgasm, and letting that bonding process take place, because it doesn't really, as I said earlier, it doesn't really take place on the male side, unless males require romance. They require romance, and they have to be a lot of times forced into it. But everybody's better off once they are.
Mm-hmm.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's kind of cool because it seems like both sexes kind of have the key. Like the male have they have the key to like the sex drive. They have the key to like being able to reproduce and having good sex once you're married. And women have the key of wanting that bonding process and kind of forcing the man to slow down and be able to experience that like true bonding that they need to be able to last for like a long-term relationship. So it's so cool to see how just like the compatibility of both sexes in this.
Yes, yes. And even down to like girls and women, we have a terrible epidemic of breast cancer these days. And
Mhm.
that there's a process that's supposed to happen with girls' breast tissue maturing. And it's supposed to, and you may have talked to some other guests about this. Have you?
A couple times, but it's always good to review it.
Okay. Well, there's type 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the breast nodules. And the way it's supposed to work is that at puberty they get they're at 1 at puberty. At 2 they get number 2, and then they're
Mhm.
supposed to hopefully get married, bond, and that type of thing, and start having children. And then 3 and 4 happen when 3 happens when they're pregnant, and 4 happens when they start breastfeeding. The
Mhm.
type 4 matured breast nodules basically are pretty cancer resistant. So, but we have so many girls and women that are have not been married, you know, for a long period into their years, and some of them have had abortions, and that messes with that process too, that breast maturation process. So
Mhm.
you look at the old days where they got married younger, even as near back as 1967, 85% of 25-year-olds were married, 25-year-old women, and 75% of 25-year-old men were married. Now we're at
Mhm.
20% for the girls, for the women, and 23% for the males. So,
Mhm.
and again, I'm not condemning anybody that isn't married and is up, you know, toward in their years. I'm just pointing out that there's a lot of good to, as well as we can, imitating what was done in the past that was so effective.
So I've heard people say that people should wait to get married until their brains are properly matured at about 25 years old. Do you know of any benefit of getting married before that? Because it seems like you're saying that like getting married young and having children young is like ideal from like an evolutionary standpoint. But if your brain isn't developed till you're 25, is there a benefit to getting married in that period between like 18 and 25?
Yeah, I think there's a big benefit. Actually, the people that have the best marriages and are least likely to get divorced and are happiest are they have the research on women, not on men, but the ones that didn't have sex, remain chaste. They got married between 22 and 28. So you do have them getting married older than 25. Um, but that where they have where they have that experience of being just with one person, and keeping hold of their chastity and their um, virginity, I guess in this case,
Hmm.
it seems to make the bond work the best, because it makes sense, because we've talked about uh, you summarized it well earlier, where you said that the women were meant to be able to be the ones that are the deciders and the decision makers, and kind of force this force the situation to not be a hookup situation, but to be a courtship and romantic movie type of a deal. And and so when they do it from that quote unquote younger age, and I'm not talking about like 18, 17, that type of thing. I'm talking about like 21, 22, 23. It seems to be the most successful model for both them and the males, because it's tough, have to have sex drive and go on up into your all the way up in your late 20s and early 30s, and not exercise it.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question that actually kind of fits along that line that you may or may not know the answer to because it goes more towards like the male side rather than the women's side, from like a chemical perspective. I have heard people give the argument that masturbation is healthy because it basically like replaces like it causes what's the word because the frequent ejaculations kind of replace the sperm and that it's like a healthy thing that benefits male fertility. But obviously, the church teaches that masturbation is wrong. And it seems like with everything else that we're talking about, the church's teaching aligns with what's actually best on like a chemical biological level. So do you know what what would be like a do you know what if that's true or not? And then how would you like defend the church's teaching from like a biological perspective?
Well, another great question. What I would say is that we're so far right now away from the design that we were meant to live, which, from, I think, as I just said, 1967 and back, probably, we were much closer. I think when, 85% of your women that are 25 have been are married, and in 1967, and 75% of the young men are. There's not a long, and they don't have porn like we have now. They don't have all the different stimulating, social media, that type of thing. I think just the natural pattern, Colleen, is for young people to get married younger. I mean, for the last 250 years in America, you know what the average age of a female was, and up until 1980, between 20 and 21. That was the average
Mhm,
age. Now, that's the median age. So half of them got married before that, and half got married after. So you see what
mhm,
I mean? I mean,
mhm.
masturbation becomes more of a moot issue if you're married and your sex life is taking care of your sex drive. And I
Gotcha.
think,
So it's like basically the argument that it creates like healthier sperm is true, but it's not supposed to be done through masturbation. That's supposed to be like lived out within having frequent sex with your wife. And when people wait to get married till they're a lot older, it's harder for men to like control the sex drive and everyone's just more unhealthy.
yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what occurred to me. Has occurred to me before, that we think, we don't realize that human history has been one of much younger marriage,
Mhm,
and then sexuality happening uh, quickly compared to the way it is now, between puberty and the time you got married. It used to only be 7 years, from puberty to the time they got married on average. And of course, they were being taught all these things, taught discipline, that type of thing, in that time period. Now it's 18 years. It's 18 years from
mhm,
the time that they're hitting puberty and
mhm.
getting married on average. So yeah, I think marriage is a natural institution, and it goes along with the peak fertility of women too. The peak fertility for women is age 19 to 29. So
Mhm,
I believe we were meant to get married probably fairly early in that time frame, and then
mhm,
start having babies fairly early, because when you think about it, that's what sex is all about.
mhm.
From nature's perspective, is creating that new generation. It's not for pleasure or fun or that type of thing that we've tried to make it into. It's for creating. It's for procreation. Does that make sense,
Well,
Steve? Because it really jumped out
yeah.
at me when I realized that our world we're living in right now is so much different than even 1967's world.
Yeah. When I think you and I talked about this before too, of just like the fact that girls in today's world are getting like they're hitting puberty so much earlier too, that like not only are they hitting puberty earlier, but then they're waiting so much longer to get married that you just have like what you just said, the 18-year span between when you have puberty and when you get married instead of a shorter window.
Right. Yeah. None of that's natural. None of it's natural.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's tough. It's tough on both sexes. So
Is there a going back to the like brain development, like brain being fully developed at 25, is there a downside to getting married before that, or if your brain isn't fully developed? Because I know people have said, like, "Oh, it affects your decision-making process." Like, do women or men who get married before their brain is fully developed risk, like, quote, unquote, "marrying the wrong person" or, like, getting into a relationship for the wrong reasons?
well, unless what I said about the chastity being part of it is, the younger woman, younger man, getting married after a chaste, relationship growing up. Unless that's in place, then what the research shows is that the ones that do wait until longer, the ones that have been sexually active,
Mhm.
promiscuous, they're better off if they wait until about around 30, to get married. And why that is, yeah, trying to, being convinced that you're with the right one, and also learning that probably through a series of relationships that, leaving each other doesn't solve everything. Although some argue that people that wait till they're in their 30s to get married or maybe older develop bad habits of leaving, when things get tough and that type of thing. So, but that's what the research has shown, is that if they're not in that chaste relationship situation, then it's better for them to wait till later to get married. The research on divorce and happiness show that it's better to be older than younger.
But if you're in a chaste relationship, then it's okay to get married before your brain is fully developed because you're A, both practicing like restraint and responsibility, and B, you're just bonding with one person.
Yes. That appears to me that's what the male and female brain were meant to do, is to those last years of the brain developing, fully maturing, were meant to be spent together and to, again, mold and meld together, where they become a unit and they're taking on life together. That's what appears to me is to be our design.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share before we wrap up today? Of anything else you want to share with the audience?
Just I'll look at my notes real quick. Just that, we have all this potential ahead of us, in front of us, knowing these things, to change society back to where we're taking advantage of knowing these things, and getting wise about chastity and the hookup culture and that type of thing, and realizing that history goes in cycles. It isn't linear. We have a cycle of sexual revolution. We have a cycle of against the sexual revolution. We've had that a couple times, historically. So we're at a good place right now to use this knowledge, and I see it being used, especially with Catholic young people, where they're dating fast. All the different things that they're doing really lend themselves to this happening, and I think, I think our society can be so much better if that's the case, because I think we've just been generally going against our design this whole time with the way it's been going the last, especially 50 years, 50, maybe even longer, 50, 40, 50 years. So,
yeah.
So, so I want to give a message of hope, a message of inspiration, because we have, since we have the knowledge and we've been through, we probably still know people that grandparents, great grandparents, that live that lifestyle and they're still together. They're still love each other and have a great marriage. That the way they did it as young people, there's a reason that it worked. The way it did for them, and it can work the same way. We're all humans, and we have the same workings. We have the same biology that they had back then. We just need to have the same behavior and the same norms.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this conversation, Dr. Joe. It is always a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and I love just being able to talk about these topics with you. So thank you.
You're very welcome. It's great to be here, Colleen. I'll look forward to next time.
Yes. And to all of our audience, if you enjoyed this episode, I will link our previous episodes with Dr. Joe in the description, and leave us any questions that you have in the comment section, because I'd love to be able to address your questions on the podcast. And as always, keep on living the culture of life. God bless.